Today we're going to talk about how to deal with an ex that has moved on from you quickly. There's a lot to cover here. Many of it philosophical by nature, but I promise by the end of this video, you'll have a clear idea of what you should do to deal with the devastation of having an ex seemingly replace you with someone else. So here's what I plan on talking about. Number one, I'd like to really introduce you to the concept of the relationship death wheel. We're also going to talk about why you need to stop getting satisfaction from feeling wronged, the thing everyone seems to miss about no contact rules, why you are responsible for your own happiness, not your ex, and how your life usually becomes worthwhile when you have worthwhile goals. So let's begin. First, start by talking about the relationship death wheel. I wanted to start in familiar territory with my fearful avoidant relationship death wheel because I feel it adequately explains the cycle that many exes are caught up in and can actually help you understand why they seem to be jumping from relationship to relationship. So one of the things I'm most famous for right now is my creation of what I'm calling the death wheel. So essentially it's this cycle that people, specifically avoidant people, get caught up into when it comes to relationships. So they first start by wanting someone to love them. They find someone, they think their troubles are over. They sort of begin to self-sabotage when they start noticing things about the other person that isn't perfect. They start thinking of leaving, then they actually leave. Then they feel super happy that they left. Then they start to feel kind of lonely that they left. Then they are saying, well, why can't I ever find the right person? Which leads them to saying, I want someone to love me again. And the cycle just continues over and over again. Now, what's interesting is the death wheel usually explains how most relationships go for our clients' exes, seeing as how many of them are avoidant. In fact, a recent study in 2021 in our private Facebook support group showed that over 70% of exes are avoidant, at least the ones that come through our program. Now, ultimately, the argument that I'm going to make is that for many exes, quickly moving on enters into rebound territory, but the actual ex won't feel that way. They're often caught up in the depression of phases 7, 8, and then the re-revolution around phase number 1. So they start to feel lonely. Then they start feeling sorry for themselves. Why can't I ever find the right person? Then they start to say, well, I want someone to love me again. They're often caught up in this depression phase. And the reason I call this a death wheel is that it's seemingly inescapable for as long as that person remains avoidant. They will crush relationships with the new person, with you, with anyone who threatens their independence unless something changes. And ironically, one of the best ways to stand out or win their affections back is simply by leaving them alone, letting the wheel spin them around until they start to reminisce about you again. They've gone through a few revolutions of the death wheel, either with you, where you're in an on-again, off-again relationship with them, or with other people, where they're just like literally crushing them with this wheel. So the really important part of getting an ex back is what you're doing when you're away from them, which is really what we're going to harp on here. So how do you deal with an ex moving on so quickly? Well, it starts first with what you are doing with your time as opposed to obsessing about what they're doing with theirs. And really that starts with you stopping the idea of getting satisfaction from feeling wronged. So many people seem to almost love the fact that they've been done a great injustice. Their ex has broken up with them and replaced them as if they were nothing. And this creates this thought pattern where people feel morally superior over those that have wronged them. They paint themselves as great victims of injustice. Now, I'm not saying this is you necessarily, but I am saying I've noticed this pattern as something a lot of my clients fall into. And I think it was Maxwell Maltz who said, resentment is a cure that is worse than the disease. So in the end, resentment will act as a poison to your soul, ultimately making your happiness impossible. So instead of thinking about how you can use this breakup as a transformative experience, you instead pour all of your energy into feeding that resentment. Instead of accomplishing something profound and meaningful, you Facebook stalk your ex. You pick apart their new person. She or he is an exact carbon copy of me. Does that mean they still love me if they are dating a puppet me? This emotional habit of feeling sorry for yourself, of obsessing over your ex, will become the very poison you lock yourself in to basically obsess about them. So what is one to do instead? Well, I think it really starts with understanding that you are responsible for your own happiness and not your ex. This is something I've been thinking about a lot. So I live in America. For those of you who are watching this from overseas, and in America, we like to propagate this idea that all men are created equal. The founding fathers of America came up with that. Yet, many of them are hypocrites. Most of them were slave owners, and women were not given the right to vote. And the statement itself is fundamentally untrue. Not all men are created equal, a fact that is often reminded to us by something as simple as Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones, where he's sort of on trial for being a dwarf.
You admit you poisoned the king?
No. Of that I'm innocent. I'm guilty of a far more monstrous crime. I'm guilty of being a dwarf.
All men are not created equal. Here's what I do believe, though. Once again, pulling from Maxwell Maltz. It is the fact by the very act of birth, one person is unjustly set out to begin a hard life in a ghetto filled with street crime, while another, born across the town at a hospital at the same exact time, the same exact moment, will begin a life in a safe suburb. In a sense, there is no justice, but we may manufacture just results for ourselves. Stop looking to your ex and their dating life for your own happiness. I think that's the great trap I've seen countless people fall into. They fall victim to the great lie of, if I can only get my ex back, then everything will be right. Their entire happiness revolves around the affections of someone else, and this will ultimately leave them disappointed, because in the end, true happiness is only found by having a meaningful purpose in life. And really that harkens to the next point I want to make, is your life will become worthwhile when you have worthwhile goals outside of your ex. This may be before many of your times, but do you remember that show, The Jersey Shore? The premise is pretty simple. A bunch of early 20-somethings go out and party every single night. The guys pick up chicks, try to sleep with them. The girls try to find the one. For some reason, this show was a hit, and I'll admit, I even watched it. But I was always left with this feeling that everyone who got caught up in that party lifestyle was incredibly unhappy. Going to clubs every night, knocking themselves out night after night, just trying to convince themselves that this was true happiness. But in the end, well, the same result kind of occurred for every person on that show. In the search for enjoyment, all they ultimately found was an empty shell. Sure, one can argue that they had successes, but these were fake by nature and often led to many of these shows' participants? Whatever. It often led to them being penalized by an empty joy. A great lie that they had to convince themselves with this feeling of happiness. The truth was that none of these contestants had any worthwhile goals, so they were caught up in their own prisons, chasing after their own tails, trying to find happiness. And I think the thing I'm learning as I get older is that too much pressure is put on relationships to ensure the other person's happiness. Just last night, I was actually watching a movie called Before Midnight. Really interesting movie. Not a lot of action, mostly philosophical musings back and forth for 2 hours. Something I would really like, but the average probably movie watcher's looking for something with a little bit more excitement and action. But I thought one of the most powerful moments was this story told by a woman about her grandmother. She basically said that her grandmother on her deathbed wrote like this 26 or 27 page letter detailing her life and lessons learned. And yet only 2 paragraphs were dedicated to her husband of like 60 years. Now, you can take this one of 2 ways. You can look at how unhappy this person was in their marriage, or you can look at how her big lesson in life is that your partner is an important part of it, sure, but you need to live for more than just someone else. Constantly setting new goals that give you meaning. This is how you find happiness in life. This is how you become more attractive to others, how you become more attractive to yourself. If life is nothing more than a treadmill where we work 8 hours a day so we can pay for a house, where we can sleep another 8 hours so we can get up and work another 8 hours, why bother with it? Why get excited? Why try? Goals, my friends, if you find something that excites you, that you want to accomplish, that gets you excited to get out of bed in the morning, it all suddenly becomes worth it. Get off the treadmill. Stop going around and around in circles, obsessing about your ex and what they're doing, who are they dating. Focus on you. Find your magnum opus. And if you want my opinion, The best way to deal with an ex moving on so fast is to forget about them. Who cares about the other person? Focus on you. Find your own happiness. Make yourself happy. And I promise you, you will become more attractive to your ex, and your ex will almost start to pay more attention to you than the person they're with, because you are not following the rules of what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be eating ice cream,